It's much stranger than what I've talked about. I've given you a very kind of quiet talk. It's much stranger. This is a guy who was in England, Neil Harbison, who considers himself the first cyborg. He has a passport from the British government as a cyborg, you know, cybernetic organism. The thing on his head is built into his head. It's part of his head. He was born with a retina. He doesn't see color. So the thing he wears on his head translates everything into sound. So he hears color. So when he sees things, he only sees black and white, it translates to color, and he hears that, you know, middle C is green or whatever it would be. He changes that way, and in fact, he uses infrared, ultraviolet, things that we do not see. He hears it. He says, in supermarkets, his favorite aisle is the detergents because they have the most colors, you know, the most sound comes out of it. So this is a speech by Martin Luther King and a speech by Hitler, according to the way it translates into color.
Which is which?
And what the interesting thing is, if I remember correctly, people usually pick the one on the right from Martin Luther King, but it's actually Hitler, and Martin Luther King is on the left. The last few things, and then I show you the final project. This is a project by Google to have computers rewrite the captions for all the photographs. Like you put the entire archive and Google rewrites it. So the human says a person riding a dirt bike is covered in mud. The computer says a person riding a motorcycle on a dirt road. This one says a human, a green monster kite soaring in the sunny sky. The computer says a man flying through the air while riding a snowboard. So it just proves the point that computers are more poetic than we think. And then finally, this is life logging. Do you know about life logging? It comes out of Sweden, a lot of it. So life logging is you wear this thing around your neck, and every 30 seconds it makes a picture, and it has editing software with it to try to make sense of it. It's very good for people with Alzheimer's disease because you remember what you did because of the camera making the images. There's another system in England called Autograph, which is based on your motion, change in temperature, change, you know, if you move forward faster. And I used it, and it was beautiful snow, you know, this big mound of snow, and I was trying to get it to take a picture. There's no shutter. You can't push anything. It just hangs. And I was jumping around like this, trying to get it. It wouldn't take a picture because it wouldn't do it. And I showed it to my class, a class where I was teaching the portfolio of pictures I took using the life logging. And I didn't tell them how I made the pictures, and I asked them what grade they would give it, and they gave it a C for lack of effort. So this is the last book I wrote, The Bending the Frame, and this is going to be the show in Copenhagen. And now I'm just going to show you one project, and then I'm finished with today's
briefly.
project. Okay, so I've said to you already that what really frustrates me the most is how little we do to resist. You know, how little we do with all the tools we have. We mostly make photographs like we used to make photographs. We don't try to do new stuff with it. The assumption 20 years ago is that the young generation that grew up in video games would be like Da Vinci's of the digital media. And that, you know, if you don't count Facebook, that's never happened. So here's a project. I suggested this to World Press Photo. I gave the speech in 2004, and they accepted it this year, so it took 12 years. But here it is. This is what we're planning, and we hope to come out with. So Four Corners project is that in the digital realm, a photograph has four corners. In the analog realm, it does too, but in the digital realm, each of the corners could hide different kinds of information. So what we've done is make a template, and the idea is to increase authorship and credibility. The photographer is more the author, and the image has more credibility. And the way it works is this. The bottom right corner, if you click on it, if you look at it, it will hide the caption, the credit, and the code of ethics of the photographer. What is your ethical code? Do you change, do you move people around in your image? Do you not? If you're a photographer of fashion, I do not use underweight models, skinny models. That may be my code of ethics. I'm a wildlife photographer. I do not photograph in zoos and pretend it's the wildlife. It's there, right there. I'm an artist, I don't give a damn about any of these rules. The backstory is the bottom left, which could be the photographer saying, yeah, I waited 3 days for this to happen, a witness, an expert, the subject. The upper left, the image context, maybe the image before and after, whatever, and the upper right is the links, and I'll show you how it works. These are the examples. So this photograph we know, yes? So if you put the cursor over it, the mouse cursor, you see the four corners pop up. If you go on the bottom right and click, it says photographed by Eddie Adams, Associated Press, with the caption. If you click here, his code of ethics. If you click on his name, I abide by the code of ethics of the Associated Press. You click on Associated Press, and you get their code of ethics. So if you're a reader and you're worried, you get it. The backstory, the general killed the Viet Cong. I killed the general with my photograph. He hated this photograph. I interviewed him about this because he felt the guy was right to kill the Viet Cong because of the Viet Cong had just massacred people, and he saw the reason. He was also much more pro-war. This was used anti-war. He didn't like that. Now the photographer has a backstory where he can say what he or she thinks about the photograph, so people can't just use it any way they want. The upper left, the image context, the picture before and after, and a film of it when it happened. So click on the picture before. This is what happened just before. I never saw this before. It's always this 1/100th of a second. When I did, take Robert Doisneau, the great French photographer, he has a book called 3 Seconds of Eternity. At 1/100th of a second, he had 300 good photographs, he thought. All he had was 3 seconds worth of work. At 1/100th of a second each, 300 photographs, kind of thing. So what we're saying is that 1/100th of a second may not be enough. Maybe you want to show something else. I'm going to show you the video, which is horrible, so if you don't want to look, it just takes like 20 seconds, but it's a killing. And I'm telling you that because it's a nice day and you may not want to see it.
Exekution auf offener Straße. Mord vor laufender Kamera.
So this is where the photograph came from. So you have, if you want to, you could click on that and see that. For me, this changed the way I view this image. In part, it changed the way I view the Vietnam War, seeing this. Then you could go here, on the upper right are the links, so, you know, General Loan, Wikipedia, and you could link to this guy's Neil Davis, he was an Australian cameraman.
I don't think anybody can be excused for killing an unarmed man. However, it happens in wartime a lot. General Loan wasn't exceptional in that. He killed the man, the Viet Cong, in the full view of the public in the streets of Saigon. That was exceptional for a national police chief to do that. There was a reason, of course, from his point of view. Only an hour before, he had learned that the Viet Cong had swept over the police compound in Saigon, and his best friend, who was a police colonel, and the colonel's wife and 6 children had all been killed.
Okay, so I'll just show you a few more examples and I'm done with it. So this photograph, if we use the 4 corners, again, you have the caption. If you have code of ethics, wall photography is interpretive. As a photojournalist, I consider my photographs are meant to respect the visible facts of the situation I depict. I do not add or subtract elements to or from my photographs. That's her code of ethics. I wrote it for her. I don't know if she agrees, but this would be a possible code of ethics, a backstory. And then the image context. This is Alan Kurdian and his brother. So he's no longer just a kind of generic child on the beach, but he has he has a history. He has a family. This is a link from Human Rights Watch, why it's okay to publish this photograph. Some people thought it wasn't. And then a few more. This is the proactive I'm talking about. This is Gideon Mendel in South Africa. Western governments, NGOs did not want to give money in Africa for antiretroviral drugs, for HIV. They thought, in a racist way, that Africans were too undisciplined to take the medicine. It would be a waste. So Gideon photographed for 4 years in South Africa, where he's from originally. This woman and her child. And I'm just going to show you here, I think it would be not too bold to say that his work helped us reach 8 million people on treatment today. That's from UNAIDS. They wrote me an email. 8 million people are on treatment and alive because of these photographs. And what these photographs do in the image context is this is what the woman looked like 4 years ago. Her T-cell count was almost 0. She was almost dead. She took the medicine for 4 years, and then, here's a graph, and this is what she looks like with her children. So because of what his work, proactively, instead of waiting for people to look near death and make pictures that, are tragic, people are alive. This is the one I showed you. So again, you could do it in the 4 corners, show the side. This is the riot in London. You could easily show what the building looked like before the riot using 4 corners. This is football, the French recently. And if you want, what you could do, here, I'll just go to this. You could show the video of the goal with or without sound, and then the photograph itself has a backstory, has a context in which it's made. And then the people go crazy and everything. This is in the US. Young black men, particularly some women, have a hashtag, if they gun me down. Which photograph would they use? So what we're doing here is the guy can also run the other photograph of himself. When the police gun people down, they often run this picture and not this picture. So there's a movement to show I'm not a gangster. And then finally, Steve McCurry. We know there's an enormous controversy now, the Magnum photographer, about him modifying photographs, manipulating photographs in Photoshop. And again, using the 4 corners, you click on his name. In the Code of Ethics, this is an artistic image allowing me to take liberties in altering the photo. I do not alter my journalistic work. And the whole argument is over. You just say what your Code of Ethics is, what you're trying to do, where you're coming from. And then the whole thing ends. So this is the way it works. The links, the image context backstory I just described to you. We're hoping to have this usable for people maybe by the end of next month. It's free, it's open source, it's going to be taught in schools, and it's a different way to use the photography. If you look at this website, demo4corners.io, it works. It's online as a kind of a just demonstration of what's possible. You can do it on your phone or your screen, but it's been there since April. And then it's a collaboration among the International Center for Photography, the Open Lab in Newcastle, and the World Press Photo Foundation, this project. So all I want to say, just to sum up briefly, is that I think there need to be dozens and dozens and dozens of interesting new ways of using digital to deal with memory, to deal with history, to deal with the future, to deal with calamity. I think we're making an enormous mistake if we think that digital is just like the analog, and we don't see all the potentials. We're being very, very conservative and even regressive by doing it. And for me, a lot of what I teach is human rights. And so at the end of the day, I want people to have better lives. I don't really care how we get there. So if we have to come up with new strategies and new ways to do it for people to have better lives, let's do it. It's more important than the history of photography or the image itself. Thank you very much.
So Fred, just a few questions before we continue. If you have any questions, raise your hand. So 4 corners, could that be somehow a way to save or recreate credibility for photography, for documentary photography?
Yeah, I mean, to go back to the question I asked that I didn't answer, what's the difference between a professional and an amateur?
Yeah, because you've been showing both. In the Lebanon, for instance, during the war, the car that runs through the war street. Right. That was a girl taking an amateur picture. That might have had a different meaning. So what's the difference?
Well, the difference is context, and my guess is maybe 1% or 2% of images online will use the 4 corners, which is fine. But it means that if a photographer you know, like yourself, who's worked for many years on a project, knows the history, knows the context. The four corners are there to be used, if you want to give it a history and a context. For those people using Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you know, I just arrived in Landskrona here, and I make a picture, I put it on my Facebook. I don't know anything about Landskrona, so I can't use the four corners in the same way. So it's supposed to help those people who know more, those people who are more invested, those people who are more serious about it. I'm aware that, you know, a lot of photographers think it's too much work, which is fine. If it's too much work, don't do it. But for those who do, you know, WordPress, we're thinking about making one award required to use four corners, and if we do that, it may well be for students, because, you know, students, we just did a hackathon in New York, you know, where you hack the photo, it's all night kind of thing, and it's young people who like this much more than the older people did, because it offers more possibilities, and they're not quite as invested in the older way. There's some older people who like it very much as well, but it's to give another possibility to, you know, like that Haiti picture, to show what it looked like from the side, or the boy who died on the beach, to show him with his brother and the bear, you know, the stuffed animal. There's so much more to it that you could do. And in my, you know, in Switzerland there was a show by Bill Ewing, we're all photographers now, and we decided at the end of it that we all carry cameras now, but we're not all photographers now.
So what's the key difference between a photographer and somebody who has a cell phone?
Okay. So if you make writings on the, and you leave it on the front of your refrigerator, I don't know, do you do that? Things like that? It doesn't mean you're a writer. Yeah? You know, you're not the same as a writer. But if you make an image and you put it on Instagram, you're a photographer. So one is, you're not just carrying a pencil by making the note on the refrigerator. Where are we? And to me, there's a lot of difference between the photographer and just the image maker. I like image makers very much. I think it's great, but I think there's an intentionality in photography that isn't always there in the vernacular. The vernacular may just be recording. There's also a vocabulary difference. Instagram and so on often puts a center of interest, is right there in the center of the image, and it doesn't use the frame to play with the frame visually to try to say something else. It doesn't use depth of field, it doesn't use foreground background, it doesn't use scale, and so on. And so I think there's multiple differences in terms of the sophistication of the building of the constructing of the image, and the intentionality of the image too. And in my opinion, I think we're making, I'm sorry, I'm taking 3 sentences. I think we're making a big error in not answering the question you just asked as a community of people. You know, what is the difference with all the stuff we do? We know that somebody who writes a tweet is not the same as a novelist. Is somebody who does an Instagram picture the same as Cartier-Bresson? What are the differences, and why don't we know the answers easily, or why do you even have to ask the question?
So what's the danger with, you mentioned the Donald Trump nightmare kind of culture, but what's the danger with not being aware of this digital revolution that we're in? You started off saying we're not aware that we're right in the middle of it.
I mean, I'll put it in a very simple way. We had Web 1.0, which was top-down web, you know, like CNN or somebody tells you what's going on. Web 2.0, which is social, horizontal, and now we have Web 3.0, which is the so-called intelligent web, where the web tells us what to do. You know, it tells from our emails we're tired, and it starts showing us advertisements for vacations. We don't ask it to, but it does it. And that's, you know, it's already happening in many, many ways, and it's going to happen more and more. To put it briefly, I don't think that a lot of people who take or make pictures are authors of their own pictures. It's not about authorship. It's not about the person behind it. Did you author that image? And you know, in a simple way, if you cannot say, yes, I authored that image, then it's not photography in the way that we're talking about in the more sophisticated professional way.
There's no thought behind it.
There's no thought behind it. There's no thought behind Donald Trump. There's no thought behind his tweets. The idea that he could say that we should go and shoot and kill his opponent, that we should build a wall, that we should kick out Mexicans, Muslims, Jews, people who are gay. There's no thought behind that. And the problem is you cannot respond to no thought with thought. There's two different languages, two different ways of thinking.
That's something to think about during the break. And always remember, the world is more important than photography, as Fred Ritchin puts it. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you.
Stay in the room 5 minutes to breathe and talk to each other. And I would like to invite Dominique Roinet to come up and prepare for her presentation.